When I did my research in my inner city Chicago public school classroom, I always knew that I was reaching my kids. I always knew that they were developing a love of literature and they were really enjoying what we were doing, but I needed proof. No one requested proof. No one came in and questioned and said, well, how do you know? But I needed it for me. Our kids were extremely low, behind grade level, so I needed to know, other than their test scores, that they were really getting it. So that's what led me to actually begin to get involved with action research. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about my actual research project and also how that process compared to national board certification. A little bit of background. I did my action research through Francis Teachers Network for Leadership Institute through the Chicago Foundation for Education last year. With a fourth grade classroom, I had 25 of my own students, but then I also had a third grade student who came into me for reading unofficially. It was interesting, and the reason I put these gender stats for the kids is because obviously I noticed a lot of statistical information with the boys because I had 17 boys. I only had 9 girls. To give you a little background about the school context, my school is located in the Austin community, which is on the west side of Chicago. You can see last year the median household income close to $32,000 a year. Our school's 98% African American, with the remaining 2% being of mixed nationalities. So it's essentially 100% African American. And out of that, 98% of our students do receive subsidized meals, so they're below poverty. Our mobility rate is extremely high, meaning that every year, 46% roughly of our students transfer in and transfer out. So it's very difficult to establish any sort of consistency for the kids from year to year. Good example of that, this year we've got roughly 585 kids, where last year when I did the action research, it was 750 kids. And because of that, we also have a high faculty turnover rate. They're difficult students. And as I was sharing with some of the other presenters this morning, the Austin community is said to be the community that the largest majority or largest percentage of inmates return to after incarceration. So it's an interesting place to be. I've been there 16 years. But that gives you a little bit of context into my situation for my actual research. When I looked at my research, basically, as I was stating, I knew in my reading program that I was not going to reach all of my students by using just the Basel textbook. Pre-selected stories by a publisher, got some kids, your average good kids, they were able to follow along, but again, a large majority of the class was at least 2 years below grade level. One of the boys who was prominent in my actual research finding was a boy who was 12. And in 4th grade, they're really 9 and 10. So I knew this Basel wasn't going to catch him. So basically what I wanted to look for is I wanted to look and see, well, what would happen if I took that Basel and set it to the side per se and introduced other types of strategies and other sorts of literature units into my classroom. And then sub-question-wise, I took a look at, will this change their interest level? Will they want to read more? Will they become more excited? And I was concerned with if both high and low level students could progress. Because again, here I had a 3rd grader who was so advanced, his teacher wanted him to come to me for 4th grade reading, and then I had that 12-year-old who had been retained 2 years and missed many, many days of school throughout his career. I also looked at reader response journals. Basically, in a nutshell, that is a journal that the students kept about a book they were reading, could be any book. And essentially, the students would write a letter to me, talking to me about what they were reading, and I was looking for them to get in the habit of putting their thoughts and feelings down on paper. Because today's generation, they're rushed or hurried. They don't want to do the why. And then what would happen in return is I would write a letter back to them and say, oh, well, I see you said this, and what about this? Or what do you think about that? So essentially that piece was to get them thinking and to try to automatically get them to say on their own, well, what do I think about that? Because it doesn't come naturally, at least to the students that I had. And then finally, a STAR strategy, which is a strategy that I developed after reading an article using this acronym about 4 things that good readers do. And this was a huge piece of my research that I just loved. I think I found I'm secretly a researcher at heart because I would get so excited to compile the little information. And I loved it. And I loved the general overall stats. And listening to Frances this morning, she mentioned the teaching journal. That nearly killed me because I am not a sit down and let's write about it. So I had to force myself to sit down at the computer. I refused to write because my mind works too fast. I had to type it. And it was one of the most valuable things that I ever found. I found distinct patterns in my thoughts about my teaching from that teaching journal. So even though you're like, oh, I don't want to do this part or I don't want to do that, it's amazing because it could have profound impact on you.